There's like, what, 8 billion people now in the world.
And I don't like any of the motherfuckers.
Give me one more Vizzy and I'm going to throw hands.
Jimbo, settle down.
Do you feel like drag should always be subversive?
People are like, oh, I don't like drag. I feel like they have a very specific view on what drag is. I hate pageant drag. I hate traditional drag.
There used to be a lot of fat phobia, colorism, racism, transphobia. People think that they're booking diverse cast because they have one king. Why are you homophobic?
I think that's called mental illness, bestie.
It's called mental illness, isn't it? Yeah, if people are giving me weird vibes, I'll let them know. I'll cut you.
For me, unless it's a drag space, I will not let them know I do drag.
Okay, thanks, Denim, for being on the pod. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Queer Collective podcast. I'm your host, Carbon.
I'm Emily.
I'm Anne Alien.
And I'm Yovska.
And welcome to the show. And this episode is brought to you by Vizzy Hard Seltzer, but more on that later. Hey, gays and allies. So today we are joined by the lovely Yovska and Anne Alien as we venture into the vibrant and creative realm of alternative drag. We'll start with a quick primer on this captivating art form, followed by a deep dive into the exploration of pushing creative boundaries and the thrill of living outside of the norm. Our conversations will finish with the drama, and we're going to chat about language and inclusivity within the drag scene. So stay tuned.
Our first guest is Anne Alien, who you may recognize from both our events and as one of our Out Loud 2023 winners, where we co-created an incredible 2-song performance video together, which can be found on our YouTube channel. Anne is a Phalian triple threat from outer space who always amazes us with their creative looks and shocking performances, and I mean that. Beyond that, Anne is an incredible wig stylist for both themselves and many local artists, so book them, duh.
And our next guest is Yovska, who is one of our favorite creatives in Canada. They are a Mexican-Canadian alternative drag performer. Yovska is the ultimate drag plushie, a horror artist, a Twitch streamer, and a bizarre legend. Welcome.
So now we're going to give everyone a little primer, everything alternative drag. Let's start really broad. Can we even just together define what alternative drag is?
Drag that is alternative.
Honestly, yeah.
I think I nailed it.
Moving on.
Drag outside the mainstream pop culture referenced maybe what you would normally see on the strip when you go to any kind of main queer community mecca.
What do you think makes someone an alternative performer?
I guess anyone that decide to do something out of the norm or expected traditional drag. Because I know when people go to see drag shows, if they don't really know what drag is, they're already picturing wig.
Yeah.
You know, the
picturing woman.
Rinds. Yeah. Well, basically more femme presenting drag, right?
Yeah.
Especially here in Toronto, I feel like we have a lot of hyper focus maybe on passability in drag. And I feel like a lot of alternative drag works against that or, in favor of maybe not having a gender.
I appreciate both types of drag, though.
Same.
I think they're both very important. Oh, yeah. Just to add that in, don't come for me.
We're only contrasting
church girls,
here.
please.
Alternative performers are people who, kind of live in the realms of maybe camp or horror or irreverent kind of conceptual performances based in theater or burlesque or clowning.
What do you personally look for when you think alternative drag?
I just think anyone who's not afraid to be a little stupid or storytell. When we're in drag, it's this is my drag character, but your drag character can also be in a character and be in a scene or a scenario. Or I think people who are just willing to kind of do something that's a little outside of people's normal comfort zone.
Oh my, have you ever done a character in a character in a character?
Yes, I have 3 characters. I have a drag persona within a drag persona within a drag persona, the inception of it all. I have 3 drag personas.
I think that's called mental illness, bestie.
It's called mental illness, isn't it?
I feel like some people might even compare it a little bit to cosplay, but how do we see, is there a difference? Is there a tie? Are they sisters? I feel like sometimes you do a little bit of character cosplay for sure.
No, I've gotten that a lot. People being how is this cosplay or how is this drag? When you do drag and you cosplay, you kind of put your own spin on it. You make the character more like your own.
Yeah.
Whereas I think if you're strictly a cosplayer, you're trying to get it as close to possible as the main source. And so with me, I was trying to be a little bit subversive. When I did Pikachu, big titty Pikachu. When I did Sonic, big titty sexy Sonic.
Big titty Sonic viral moment.
And, for me, I'm a huge weeb as well. So a lot of that goes hands in hands, the inspirations I pull from. And as a drag artist, you pull a lot from pop culture. So that's my equivalent of doing a share.
I used to cosplay before I did drag, and it was pretty rigid, I would say. The landscape of cosplay has changed dramatically. There used to be a lot of fat phobia, colorism, racism, transphobia, and it's changed quite a lot over the last 10, 15 years where that's not an issue, and people are even less judgmental of that doesn't look character correct. You're going outside of your limits. So I feel like drag and cosplay are like two goofy cousins or sisters.
Yeah.
Drag is like kind of like a second character, and then like that character is doing cosplay, if that makes any sense. Like, let's say, like, I don't know, like, you have a celebrity, like, I feel like I'm losing Lady Gaga again, but, you know, this is how the gays can relate to it.
Yeah.
Lady Gaga cosplaying someone.
Yeah.
You know, her persona is cosplaying another character. That's the difference between, like, drag and cosplay, I feel.
Yeah. Do we feel like drag is inherently queer and should be queer? I know on Drag Race we had a straight queen.
I love Metamorphosis. She's so sweet.
Hilarious.
And honestly, she puts a lot of emphasis on being like, I am a straight person in a queer space.
Yeah.
And I think that's how it should be handled. And, you know, just being aware of like the space you're taking up, you know, the gigs you're also taking up. Honestly, I think she's doing such a respectful way of going about it as well, and uplifting the community at the same time. Drag can be for anyone. Just like keep in mind that where it comes from in the communities that it was mostly being used in, you know, especially before this whole Drag Race boom, you know, money boom.
Totally.
People were doing this out of like nothing, you know.
Drag
for
performers
pennies.
were viewed as freaks with even in the queer community. So it's like it is a huge turning point within the last 10, 15, 20 years to have us be respected individuals or valued individuals within the queer community. If you're being brought information that, hey, this is how people are respected in different ways and you don't want to grow and learn from that, then maybe you should, you know, take the time to educate yourself and not be in active queer spaces.
So kind of talking about drag getting more popularized, especially with RuPaul's Drag Race, but the origins of drag really being about pushing the public's boundaries, especially around gender norms and like gender roles. Do you feel like drag should always be subversive? Should it always be pushing for more?
The number one thing drag should always be, you should be having fun with it. You should be able to enjoy yourself with it, be expressive with it. And if you want to express yourself in a non-subversive way, that's great. You want to do a subversive way, that's great. I don't think it necessarily has to keep pushing boundaries. Like that's great for like anything, for growth and just to see diversity. But if you want to do non-subversive drag, if you want to just do what's comfortable for you and what you're happy doing, I think that's great.
I think
know?
all forms of art have their own place and purpose, especially. It's like this, I think, would apply to other art forms as well. It's like, does all art need to push boundaries?
Personally, I feel like sometimes there's so much discourse with like alternative girls being like, I hate pageant drag. I hate traditional drag. And to me, it's just like so silly because it's like they can respect you or they cannot respect you. Like that's up to them. That's their own problem. But you don't. That's not a problem that you have to have necessarily with that art type, you know?
Yeah.
I see it a lot like music. Like there's so many different music genres. And then even within those music genres, it's not just that there's metal. It's like there's so many subgenres of metal. We're not really here to argue. It's like we're here to provide like a huge, colorful array of experiences. And it's when people start to limit other people from being able to express themselves, then we have an issue.
However you want to express yourself, I think there's going to be an audience for it.
Yeah. Somebody will always appreciate it.
Instead of beating down someone else, just focus on like uplifting what you like, you know?
Work with the people who like get what you do because you will have the most fun.
So then what sort of impact do you personally see or would like to see alternative drag have on drag as a whole? But then maybe even also just on the queer community as a whole?
Just more visibility for it, you know? And it's really funny because sometimes I'll have people that are like, oh, I never really liked drag shows or I never really connected with drag queens or this and this. But then I saw your work and I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. That's drag?
Yeah.
People are like, oh, I don't like drag. I feel like they have a very specific view on what drag is.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's like a lot of diversity in it, you know, just like art or like anything, you know?
I'd like to see kings stop being lumped in with alternative drag performers. I think a lot of the time people think that they're booking diverse casts because they have one king. I feel like often people revere alternative drag as cosplaying drag. Like we're dressing up. We're like a little kid in mommy's high heels like, oh, look at them over there doing their thing. And I think I'd like to dispel that stereotype that needs to, it's tired. There's an artistry and a method in making money in drag and in nightlife. However, I think you don't go to a bar because it sells only vodka. You go because it has a variety of drinks. And if you plan on only drinking vodka, then that's great. But if you have the opportunity to drink something else, it should be there for you. And I think think, oh, the queer community is lacking not just in representation for drag, but for other queer communities. We see that across the board. And I think people are afraid because it won't make money. But marketing wise, it will absolutely bring more money if you're bringing in the other 50 to 70% of the queer community that's not represented.
Do you feel like alternative drag has been popularized in recent years? And do you think that has had any impact on the overall drag scene?
It has been a little negative in some ways. Like people will expect you to be like ooky spooky and like gore, blood, and this and this and this. But there's also other types of alternative drag. I feel like sometimes it also gets put in a box into what exactly it is. Over time, I think people, like just the same way with drag, people are going to start seeing, oh, there's other ways to do alternative drag. The more we see more drag, more visibility of it, the more we're going to see, oh, there's more ways to do certain things.
Next, we really want to dive into the theme of pushing boundaries and living outside the norm. So, you two, visually, for anybody that's watching the podcast, if you're listening, you have no idea. But if you're watching the podcast, you can visually see that they got some pretty dope, wild outfits on. So, I've heard from yourself, but also from someone like Cream and Akuchi, that there's times where you'll call up an Uber and the Uber sees you and then they'll drive away.
That's just business.
You know what?
Business as usual.
That hasn't happened to me here yet.
No.
But it happened to me so many times in specifically California.
Oh, they be leaving me behind.
But you know what? I think I feel like when I'm in costume, they're like, "Oh, you going to a party or something?"
Right.
So I feel like people don't really click in like, "Oh, that's an F
They
slur."
think you're drinking. They think I'm soliciting.
right.
And then they see my face and they're like, I don't
want to pick them up.
Can you try describing your experience when it comes to being out in public in full drag? What has that been like for you?
A lot of people trying not to look at me. It's so funny because it's like I'll be walking like in the most ridiculous outfit. It's like so obvious they're trying not to like pay attention. They're just like walking by, like looking away. And I'm
My
just
favorite
like,
is the sneaky phone where they're like,
yes! Oh my God, when I'm in the subway or something and they're like, and then I just pose, I'm like,
I'm like, hey.
obviously like I'm in like the most ridiculous getup. Like I'm aware of that. I swear I'm not just crazy.
Not just.
When I'm in the Uber most of the time, I tend to be a little bit more friendly, but I'll just say I'm a freelance artist. And they think I'm like a clown or I'm like a Cirque du Soleil kind of, and I kind of lean into that a little bit. So sometimes people will be like, can I get a selfie? This is like, oh yeah.
Oh, you're brave. I just say, oh, I'm going to a costume party.
Yeah, if people are giving me weird vibes, I'll let them know. I'll cut
No,
you.
for me, it's regardless. For me, it's
I'll lean into
regardless
the
of.
crazy. At this point, I look like this. I'll lean and I'll be like, this is my no-no zone. Get out of here.
Unless it's a drag space, I will not let them know I do drag.
Yeah. On the flip side, how do you feel being in full drag in a drag space or like in a queer space?
You'll feel famous.
Yeah, depending on the space, you just feel on top of the world. You just feel like everyone's here to see me, and this is this party don't stop till I walk in. Like it's that kind of vibe.
I want to get to the
treated
point
well.
where someone starts crying when they see me. I think that'd be great.
For me, it's are
Yeah.
you Yovska?
No! Okay, see, this is so silly. If people see one person that's alternative and they see anyone else doing alternative, they'll be like, oh, are you so-and-so? So
Getting called Jimbo for having big boobs is
Oh
crazy.
my.
I've gotten a Bora as well. Like
Bora.
before I was on that other show. People need to just not be like, oh, just because you did this, you're copying that person.
On the note of like referencing other people's work, how do you feel in terms of like someone starting drag and taking references and like starting by copying, I guess?
I feel like sometimes for like certain drag artists, it can be frustrating to be like, oh, this person's basically just doing what I'm doing. Honestly, at the end of the day, it's whatever, you know. It's also how you kind of learn how to do your things. Well, I would advise to, try to change yourself up a little bit. And like, when you look up to someone, it's natural to try and, try to emulate them a little bit,
And you start at base zero. So it's like learning how to contour or how to do this type of paint, or if you're doing a character paint, or if you're like looking at a Yovska paint and you're going, I want to try and recreate this because I like this.
Yeah.
Learning then in time when you do it a couple times, okay, how would I change the color of the shadow, or would I change the lashes, or would I change this?
Or, more importantly, how can I make this reflect my own experience, as a person, and how can I make this reflect my own like world and, my interests? Because, you have your own story, and I think it's important to try to bring that forward in your art as well,
Do you feel differently about it if it's someone who's already established, who's copying the look of like a smaller performer, or is copying the look of somebody who is like the same size of them, perhaps?
Yes.
If you do, take inspiration from someone and it's obvious, give a little bit of credit. Like it doesn't hurt anyone. I saw some drag artist that was taking inspiration from another artist and decided to not only like not give credit, but then start fighting with them on Twitter. And it's like, girl, why? It was like the pain was so fucking similar too.
Yeah.
We can't all be pioneers, and we're not going to, because there's so many lived experiences, not even in our own cities, but in other countries that are happening that are not being broadcasted. There's crossover and there's things that we can pull from the ether. But I think when it comes down to, if you're in a community and you're bumping shoulders with people who have more privilege than you and have more access or space to things, and they start then taking from smaller creators without compensating those people, without giving those people their flowers or being on speaking terms, it creates this thing of like, there's no integrity in creating something that's personal to you.
Drag has a lot of tendency to kind of plagiarize itself over and over. And it kind of cheapens it a bit, you know? It's kind of like, just be like, you know, oh, I took inspiration from this person or this person. Like, it's really not that hard and it's not that big of a deal.
We do so much better as a community when we actually act like a community. Healing the community comes also from the other side of people ready to admit where they've been wrong and holding themselves accountable and saying, I want to be better.
If you want to network, like that's a really great way to, you know? You're like, oh, I love your work. Let me just reference it.
Oh my God.
And tag you, you know? Like, great way to network, great way to make a new friend. I don't think anyone's going to take a problem with it unless they're immature in themselves, you know?
Yeah.
But before we get into that, this podcast is proudly sponsored by Vizzy Hard Seltzer. And with Vizzy's vibrant flavors, you can now follow your own vibe.
For those of you who know Queer Collective, you know that Vizzy has been a longtime supporter of us in our mission to create accurate and positive representation for the entire queer community. So if you are a hard seltzer drinker, we highly recommend drinking and supporting one that you know also supports the queer community.
And now, back to the episode. So, both of your dragses really pushes boundaries, right? It's like a little bit wacky, a little bit weird. Actually, it's really fucking weird, which is great. What has your journey with self-confidence looked like from your first public performance till now?
I think I came in really like guns blazing in confidence. Like I will wear like a fucking pool noodle and feel like the shit in the room.
Yeah.
But it's really funny. I think over the years and, you know, having done television and et cetera, I think it really humbled me. And sometimes it got to a point where it's like, I think I got a little too humbled and like my confidence went all the way the fuck down. But, you know, in a way, I think that's been a great lesson for me as well. Kind of character growth and, you know, just kind of learning to make myself better, but also trying not to be myself over any mistake kind of thing. Cause like, you know, that happens. That's natural.
My first experience was not very welcoming, both on like my personal side and then also when I went out into my first open stage. A lot of people did not know what to think of me. Not a lot of drag artists wanted to speak to me, even though this was quite a huge venue with quite a lot of performers at that time. It was thrilling, amazing. It was everything that the adrenaline rush that you can imagine. And I made money, honey. But when the second I hit off the stage, I was like, I'm having a panic attack. I need to leave. And I had a nice little vomit and cry at home because it was just so overwhelming.
Yeah.
I was like, I know this is what I want to do, but it was like people were like, I don't think you should do this. I don't really think this is the thing that needs to be seen. It taught me a lot about finding your audience and embracing yourself and not second guessing your ideas for things, because ultimately you're doing it for yourself.
Because it can be so easy to get discouraged when it comes to art, you know, because as artists, I feel like we can see so many positive things and then focus on one negative.
And compare what other people have and where you are. I always tell people, if you're walking on stage, whether you're booked or you're not, and it's an environment where people are watching you, you have to have the opinion of, everybody's here to see me for the next 3 minutes. This crowd is mine. The stage is mine. I own 51% of this company. And so if you have that delusion when you step on stage, it's like when you're dancing in your room to your music, you're like, I'm doing this. There's no reason why there should be a differentiating. I'm up here doing my thing.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that people will pick up on is, are you having fun? Are you enjoying yourself?
So to sum up the confidence piece, we get it externally from two places, from community being welcoming and warm, and from friends being supportive as well. And then internally, it's delusion, correct?
Be your biggest
honestly,
cheerleader.
as a drag artist, you gotta be a little delusional.
Across the board. Doesn't matter what.
Honestly, as an artist in general, you gotta be a little delusional.
I
A
agree.
little bit, you know, at least a little bit.
You have to start as your own biggest fan.
You
because
have
when you
to.
first start, there's no fans.
Yeah.
So
Girl, you gotta walk in there
who
thinking
go
you're
fan?
the hot shit.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that can take you so fucking far.
in a kind way, stay kind and be nice to
Yeah,
people.
obviously stay kind to people.
But with confidence.
But because art is so subjective, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes people can be a little bit like, not to be like mean or anything, but people can be like a little bit sheepish. So if, if they see other people being like, oh, that person's like good or this and this, you're kind of bound to believe it a little bit more.
Totally.
So just believe in yourself and people will start believing it. Like what does RuPaul say? Like if you can't love yourself.
How you gonna love everybody else?
Oh, no, wait, no, actually, that didn't make that's not the quote. Maybe I had a little too much Vizzy, but
that's okay.
You kind of get what I say,
May all your Delulu come Trululu.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
The next region that we would like to venture into would be around language and inclusivity in the overall drag scene. There's kind of this notion that drag scenes aren't welcoming of any drag artist who either isn't a cisgendered man or who doesn't fit into the typical like women's beauty standard of like female impersonation. I'm wondering if this is accurate and if you could speak to your own challenges perhaps of navigating this dynamic.
I would say I am thankful to not have run into that as much. Like I honestly have not run into that, but
That's good.
I think that's because I'm thankful that other people have trailblazed it up a little bit more than I have. Other people that have come before me probably have made a difference in those scenes as well.
Yeah, I think specifically in Toronto, there's been an evolution. I feel like there's a rebirth every couple of years. And the landscape of when I first started drag in 2018, 2019, compared to now is two completely ballparks. Hill battles that I had before that have nothing to do with my skill level or my talent level or whatever. And people just being like, I don't really want to have drag kings a part of. I don't really want to have women a part of it. I don't want to have trans people a part of it. It's better. But I feel like sometimes you still see a cast of 20 people and maybe you have one drag king. And maybe sometimes that one drag king is also the only person of color, the only trans person.
Yeah.
It's like a 3-for-1.
Yeah, it's like a buy one, get one free. And those performers notice that and they get caught in a place of needing to represent yourself and be represented, but also being
honestly,
tokenized.
I see that happen a lot with drag kings, especially in Toronto.
It's a huge problem. It's really concerning. And I still think, in my personal opinion, it might ruffle some feathers, but I don't think that our queer communities are as integrated as people think they are. And a lot of the excuses that I hear from show producers, other people are like, oh, well, lesbians don't come out to drag shows. And, trans people don't come out to drag shows. And I don't see alternative people coming out to open stages. You have to kind of ask yourself, what about your business? If you're a business practice, you're running a business, a successful business needs to be run on practicality. And if your spaces are not safe, you have to kind of improve that. And we're seeing a change in the type of performers coming out. There are so many new performers that they can't avoid.
But also to add to that as well as someone coming from the ballroom scene, I've heard so many people in the ballroom say, I didn't feel welcomed in drag spaces. I didn't feel welcome in queer bar spaces.
It's not like
I felt welcome in the ballroom scene, but I didn't feel welcome in these other spaces.
It's not a weird anomaly or something that, you must have earned you not being welcome.
Yeah, because it's not like there isn't any for example, any black POC, queer people that want to come to shows. Because I see them in the ballroom scene, but they don't feel as comfortable in certain queer bars or queer spaces. And I've actually heard that directly from other people. It's like people in the ballroom scene.
I still feel like there's a divide between gay nightlife and queer nightlife.
100%. I think the biggest thing is that they're not making us feel represented. So we don't necessarily feel like that space is for us. Like when I feel like like lesbians, femmes, them,
trans people of color.
I feel like our space and a lot of the spaces that we create with our events and like a lot of the spaces that other organizers that we know who are intentionally creating these spaces, the crowds do show up.
They're buying drinks at the bar. They're tipping the performers. They're communal with each other. Is there fighting? Are there people who are drunk and belligerent or whatever? Like I'm not seeing these things. I'm seeing really healthy communities.
You know what? I think it comes from a place of stubbornness because there's a lot of but these people they're trying to be so woke and this and this and this. But it's not as big as a deal as you're making it. It's so simple, They
think if it's not broke, don't fix it. But it's broke, babe. If you're only selling vodka at the bar, great. You're a vodka bar. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's a niche thing that people would love. But you need to provide variety for people.
Yeah. There's a difference between no one's calling you the devil. No one's saying you're fucking evil. Just do a little bit of changes.
You need to also be giving them the space to feel safe to come out and perform and get the confidence to be able to have charisma with a crowd, to make a connection, but also to put money back in their pockets.
And if you complain about it, they also don't have the same directory of all these queens on Drag Race making YouTube videos on how to do. They don't have that same directory of things to pull from.
Nope.
But also too, I've seen so many fucking talented drag kings that put as much effort as any drag queen or
So
more.
much work. You need to just take the time to sit down and actually do the research and not just pretend and have the easiest name that comes up to you, because I guarantee that performer that you find wants you to discover 10 other performers just like them.
Love it. The next question I have requires a little bit of a backstory, but I feel like you probably have heard this from the show, but I'm going to explain the story for the listeners. So on the most recent season of Canada's Drag Race, season 4, the queens had a really valuable conversation around language, and I wanted to see if we could all expand on this. So in the episode, the girlfriend Experience, who's a trans woman, said that she finds the terms like bio queen to be trans exclusionary. And then at the same time, Denim, who is a trans man, said that she finds terms like AFAB and AMAB being used on cisgender performers to be transphobic. And Denim goes on to like elaborate on this, explaining that this is because it was originally a term made for trans people to be able to describe themselves, but it being used as an umbrella term for any performer who isn't a cis man is leading to confusion, stating that I've been addressed as an AFAB queen and people just automatically assume that I was a woman, but that's not how I identify, and I no longer feel comfortable using that term as a trans person. So I'm wondering what we think about this, especially as a performer who I'm sure has like been grouped into this category too and has like had a lot of these terms used for you. What do you think?
Yeah.
Anne?
I mean, like I said, when I entered the drag realm in Toronto, it wasn't that welcoming. And I had people asking if I was straight because I'm pansexual, and I was at the time in a straight passing relationship, and people were asking if I was, or having conversations around whether I was appropriating drag by doing drag. For me, I'm also a trans non-binary person. That's already confusing for other people. Not my fucking problem, to be honest. But trying to then have those conversations in drag, then it would be like conversations on like passability, I think is a really big thing. And using terms like AFAB for me, it was all I had. When I heard bio queen in the beginning, I was like, that sounds hella transphobic. I'm sorry. By being biologically female also just like draws to my genitals, which is super strange to just like, hi, what genitals do you have? I feel like it really got co-opted by like cis individuals of feeling like, oh, this is the appropriate terminology. Like, we don't call people trannies, we call them, you know, that they're trans people. It's like, I feel like people thought that that's like the next evolution for thing without actually taking the time to get to know somebody's personality, and rather than washing over their lived experience of going, oh, I'm hearing different, I'm clocking different things, or I'm seeing different things, so therefore I perceive you this way.
Even as someone that's not in that, you know, that's wouldn't consider themselves like trans, but it's just kind of weird to see people try to like use such a label to like label every single person, because it's such a personal thing.
Well, I think as humans, we like categorizing people, just like that's the way our brain works. We like putting people in boxes. I think from the event producer perspective of like wanting to create diverse lineups, that was like a term we would use of saying like AFAB performers, but like not realizing that element of it.
And it comes down to just stereotypes and stigmas, right? It's like on the flip side, if I'm going up to a gay cis man and I'm going, oh, because you're gay, that means you're a bottom or XYZ, or you're this type of person. We're also then doing that same thing to
I do call people bottoms.
Well, we're all bottoms. They're all bottoms.
Do you think there's a need for some type of language there? I think they called it a hyper queen was what they recommended on the show.
Hyper queen makes the most sense because you're heightening feminization, right? We're talking about femininity, masculinity. Masculinity can exist in being a woman, and femininity can exist in being a man. And so I feel like hyper queen works really well. I feel honestly, drag queen, drag king, drag performer.
I just ask someone, what do you like to be referred to as? What kind of drag performer do you consider yourself as? It's not that difficult.
Because it is very individual. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people that find labels very helpful.
Totally.
And then there's a lot of people that are like, fuck labels. I don't want any of them, actually.
Labels can be so freeing. They can also box you in another way if depending on the other people setting the terms and conditions of what that label means.
So then, on the note of inclusivity, then, in your opinion, how can the community at large work to improve upon the current drag scene so that it does feel safer and more inclusive?
Exposure. I mean,
The way you said that.
Exposure.
We're in, if I can just liken it to kind of the times that we're going through, we're in a very charged political time. And the only way to stay on top of it is to be educated. And being uneducated about something doesn't make you weak. Clinging on to knowing that you're uneducated and you don't want to do the work does make you weak.
I feel like there's this fear of being seen as uneducated, and that there's no problem with that. Even as like someone who streams, like I've seen people come in, you know, from different cultures, say something that might be seen as problematic.
Yeah.
Like I'm not gonna get mad at them or anything. I'm just gonna be like, hey, you know, Bessie, you know, we use these words instead,
Yeah.
and they're chill about it.
Yeah.
If you're only, you know, eating vanilla ice cream, vanilla is delicious. But throw a little swirl in there or get a little almond on top. Like there are ways of integrating things and still enjoying vanilla ice cream.
Totally.
But also, like on a different note as well, like to the people who want to educate others, there is like a way to kind of start off. Like people go in really hard onto people that might not even know, you know, might not know any better. So I think there's also like try to come from a place of understanding. And if they still don't understand it, they're still being like maybe like if there's like a difference between being like an asshole about it or if they're being like really rude about it, then that's different.
You could
But if they're being like, oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't know, then you know that you can be like, you know, oh well, you know, like this is how we do it.
People are not perfect.
I definitely think that's something that the queer community itself can for sure work on. And I think as like our whole political environment continues to get more and more polarized. Yeah, people are getting very, very polarized with it. I think just giving that more of that grace is going to like bring people together rather than push people farther apart.
Not everything's black and white. I think it's very much that. It's not just black and white. There's a lot of gray area and people can be such an in-between of things.
Okay, so this last question is just a little piece of advice. You've been giving lots of great nuggets of wisdom throughout this whole episode. I'm wondering what advice you might have for fellow weirdos who are listening, who are really keen to either start drag or get to a place where both of you are.
I mean, for me, I think it's something we've already mentioned before. You know, don't give up. Try to find your audience. It doesn't matter what the fuck you're doing. So many people in this world, one person or like a couple people are at least bound to like what you're doing.
Even if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, like you go to an open stage and you're like, this was awful, I never should come here, I wasn't well received. Somebody else who either is your performer or somebody in the audience will go, oh my God, I love that. Have you ever heard of this performer or have you ever heard of this bar? And you'll find your opportunity.
It kind of is almost like the lottery. It's like just like a bunch of like possibilities. Just keep getting out there, getting your name out there.
Things
You're bound
just
to land
fall
something.
together.
You will eventually land something.
If you're going to do it, I just say don't wait. I waited so long to do drag because of so many inherent things of like the spaces we're not welcoming to everyone in the queer community.
To add to what you're saying, like if you find someone that likes what you do, you know, grab onto them, you know, respect them, appreciate them, because it can also be easy to be like, oh, that person likes me, like look, you know, like kind of look them aside.
That's your community.
If you want to change your world, you need to step into other people's world and let them show you around.
Totally. I love that. Perfect.
Lovely.
Great note to leave it off on.
So thank you so much, Yovska and Anne Alien, for being here today, especially in drag, especially under these hot lights.
Thank you for also, I'm going to hijack this. Thank you also for creating so much space. We're talking a lot about space and having exposure to have conversations around what people like to be addressed as and what we look like in all the different forms and varieties that we come in. And I just want to thank you guys for having the best flavorful parties.
Yeah, thank you for making us feel like stars.
Yeah.
You are stars.
You are
Thank
stars.
Yes.
I don't have to make you feel that way.
Yeah. And just
You woke up like that.
Yeah.
Well, come on.
Well, I'm just trying to be humble.
like I was actually lying.
If you like this episode, make sure that you leave a like and subscribe and leave a comment down below. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure to leave us a 5-star review because it really does help the podcast out. That's everything that we have for you today. And until next time, peace.